Occasionally, a book comes along that takes me way too long to finish. The reason it takes me too long is that I continue to turn the pages back. I reread sections, passages, phrases. I roll ideas around my head that I've already considered. The books that take me too long are the books that I don't want to finish because they are so good. So good that when I do finish them, I turn directly back to page 1. Amie Souza Reilly's Human Animal, a Bestiary and Essays is one of these books. I had the distinct honor to speak to Amie about her book, about language, aggressive masculinity, and so much more. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Amie, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today about your book, Human Animal, a Bestiary and Essays. There's so many places to start with this, but let me say just congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
This book does everything that I want in a book like this, how it uses the essay form, bits of memoir mixed with critical theory, how it references not just other works of literature, but other works of visual art, right? From film to paintings, etc. And how all of this works kind of in service to a central narrative.
Thank you. Gosh, that was such a kind way of thinking through that project.
I want to continue on with this thread a little bit, and I want to talk a little bit about form and content. Because these are essays, but they're linked together, right? To form a kind of larger narrative, really kind of the story of your former neighbors and their acts of micro and not so micro aggressions. But then there's this extra layer of the animal metaphors too. So I'm curious how you think, right, about form and content and how these things like play together and sort of enhance one another.
I love this question. So I think that for me, form and content are, first of all, I went to Fordham, so they teach a whole class on form and content. So I feel like my head is in that space often anyway. But I think they're just so intertwined, that I can't really when I'm thinking about form, I'm often thinking about well, how does the content need to fit whatever form I'm dumping it into, and then, but how can I do that in a way that rattles whatever form it is? So the original idea I had was to have 10 separate essays that weren't quite so linked, but I couldn't get that to work. I couldn't finish one thought in 5,000 words, so. But I really like the idea of calling it a bestiary in essays because they're physically inside of it. So I held on to the title, even though there's certain I think that's a fair argument to say that's not maybe even it's like a book length essay instead of linked.
Oh, sure. And I to be fair, I kind of struggled on how to phrase that. I wasn't quite sure because they do stand alone, but they also, I feel like, function as chapters a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But I like the idea of having those kind of self-contained chapters too. So I feel like I can go back and dip kind of in and out of the book, if that makes sense. So this is great how it functions in kind of a couple different ways as essay, where I can go in and just kind of flip to, wait, let me get there, on boundaries once more, right? But then I can also then start over, right, as a complete sort of narrative. So I think whether on purpose or not, it's really cool how that works.
Oh, awesome! Thank you.
We live in interesting times, right? I think that's fair to say. And let me say this, as a cis-het white male of a certain height and a certain build, I understand that I get a certain amount of power and respect when I walk into certain rooms, and that I've done nothing to earn that, nothing to deserve that. And as often as I try to eschew that as often as possible, but more importantly, I just try not to abuse, I think, the privilege, right? That again, I've done nothing to earn. But there seems to me to be a kind of increase in aggressive masculinity, as you touch on in the book.
Yeah. Yeah, to process that in a way that is going to sound eloquent and not just be like, yeah, dude, you're right.
That works too. I mean,
There is I mean, one of the things that I keep thinking about, and actually you also have recently written something similar in a review, is that's like writing that pre-election and then publishing it after. And it's sort of like that aggressive masculinity was something that during the 3 years that I wrote it, and then like in those final days of copy edits, there was still this little bit of hope that kind of aggressive masculinity was something that we would look at and say like, well, whew, we're working, we're like people are doing work, and we realize where we went wrong, and something's going to change. And I remember finishing the essays and going back in and looking for places to enhance like the idea of gentleness, because it felt important. Like there seemed to be this little bit of hope that we had, and I was like, listen, I have done something violent. This feels like a very violent book about violence, and I want people to read it, and I don't want to also be giving harm. So late, and then November happened, and I was like, we don't deserve gentle. Maybe I hope this doesn't seem flippant. Clearly, we haven't learned, and things are worse.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really feared, well, I'll say in 2016, was not so much what would come from the government, but how certain people would feel emboldened to act a certain way. And I think we see that in the brothers in your book, that these are a couple of men who, for whatever reason, and I don't want to label it as, they are now given permission by sort of the political air, but I kind of feel like that's part of it. But these guys then feel like they have permission to sort of do whatever they want, right? And act however they want, towards whomever.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when all of that started, it was 2014. So like it was there, but not like in a lot of ways, it's like messed with the way I think, because it was the brothers doing those things and then the first Trump presidency. But in my head, those feel flipped.
No, that makes total sense. And especially like, I think that's part of the power of the book too, is that now it feels even more relevant. Being able to, you and me both, right? You and me both. And yeah. I don't really know, not to get like too sort of, dark and desperate, but I don't know what to do about that. Right. I mean, so as much as I sort of, like I just said, try to like understand the space that I'm in and the privilege that comes with looking a certain way, right? As much as I try to understand that and not abuse it, there's a lot of people that don't. They're like, yes, I will use this to whatever means I can. And that includes whatever kind of violence they can get away with.
Yeah. 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 I mean, there is I'm a white woman with an extreme amount of privilege too. And I see it happening with other white women who are, the violence and just ability to use that, because there are no consequences anymore.
Yeah, we feel like we can get away with everything, and luckily, well, I mean, I think you and I understand that and don't try, right, to get away with anything that we shouldn't. Right. But yeah, so okay, bringing this up, I want to keep going with this idea of violence. Well, I mean, I don't really want to talk about violence, but right, there's this idea of violence. So you quote Virginie Despentes. I'm going to butcher that, right? That's going to sound terrible. You talk about, you quote her from King Kong Theory, and In the prologue to that book, A Gun for Every Girl, she writes, I am writing as an ugly one for the ugly ones, the old hags, the dykes, the frigid, the unfucked, the unfuckables, the neurotics, the psychos, for all those girls who don't get a look in the universal market of the consumable chick. And so I'm curious how you were thinking about audience as well. Are you in some way writing for other women who experience a similar kind of violence and to call attention to it as violence because some people won't see this as violence? And by some people, I mean men.
I mean, yes, absolutely. I think that's where the kind of desire to lean into something gentle came from. I don't think I understood what happened as violence until I wrote it. It was really just this kind of weird thing that happened that I couldn't work through. And I mean, reading King Kong Theory helped me embrace a lot of like the counter violence that seems necessary in order to exist in the violence, like that sort of allowance of, like, I think about her all the time, and that's sort of like, how many times have I shrunken back or labeled something incorrectly in order to protect the men, but that protection is really to protect myself.
From the men?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not the first person to say this, but like it's everywhere on the internet when people are like, when women say, what would we do without men? Like, who's there to protect you? But like, who do we need protecting from?
Right. It's like the snake eating its own tail, isn't it? I mean, it's right. Yeah. If there weren't men, you wouldn't need protecting from men already. And we just can't seem to understand that at all.
Right.
And I think DuPont is such an interesting, figure and character in these conversations too about, so I remember, have you seen Baise-Moi, her film?
No.
Okay. It's a tough watch. I don't know if you've read the book either, but it's.
I've read of the book. I know I don't. I know enough to know that I'm not sure I could watch it.
It's short. Yeah, right. And I'm not recommending that you do, but I mean, I watched this film along the same time that I discovered Catherine Breillat and her films. Her films Romance and Fat Girl, and I'm watching these, and I mean, of course they're erotic, and some people will label them as pornographic, but I mean they're not, right? They're dealing with so many more issues, but also like this issue of what women want sexually, how women want to see themselves, and how women can and can't fight back, right? And what happens, right, when two women in Baise-Moi go on essentially a killing spree, and this kind of metaphor then of us, all the men being, so afraid of these violent women, but that speaks to what you're saying, right? The violence that they're perpetrating came from the violence that was perpetrated on them, and we just we don't acknowledge this. But I mean that quote from her, I think, really resonated with me, and how I was reading the book as well, which wasn't necessarily for someone like me, but I could see that message extended to, I think, a wider audience of women who need to hear that, know that this is a kind of violence and don't excuse it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I kind of wish that it was more. For a second, I thought about teaching that the essay with the box cutter, because I do what if more 20-year-old men read that? Like, would there be, could we? But then there's the part of me that's like, well, you you claim to be a pacifist and anti-violence, but then I'm also like, well, why? And there's all of this. I didn't end up teaching it. My dog is about to come in. I'm sorry.
No apologies. I mean, you may hear my dog bark because she barks at everything, so it's okay. What kind of dog do you have?
He's I'm not really sure. We thought he was like a Vizsla mix. He's brown. Lab-ish Weimaraner, mutt, adorable.
Gotcha.
Very, very, very poorly behaved.
Yeah. No.
Why don't you come in?
Look, we are supposed to spoil our pets. It's yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
And you do not have to apologize to me for your dog being not well behaved. So, I had a chocolate lab who recently just passed away, and it was tough. It was really tough because he was like my best friend for 13 years, right? I mean, he and I went through, I can't even begin to tell you how much we went through together. But people would always ask like, oh, what kind of dog is that? I said, oh, he's a lab. And they're like, well, he looks a little more like a Chesapeake. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, he's a lab, right? Like, he's clearly some kind of lab and something else. And that's fine with me. I'm like, his name is Sam. Like, there, right? There you go.
Totally.
So speaking of teaching, you mentioned in the book that you tell your students that this kind of writing is like giving birth, right? And so I want to leave the motherhood metaphor alone for just a second. We're going to come back to that, to the motherhood metaphor. But I'm really curious in this kind of writing, are you paying attention? Are you aware? Are you wary of how you present yourself? Because I think there could be I'll just let you answer there. I'm sorry.
No, I want to know where you're going to go.
Oh, okay. So I think when we write this kind of nonfiction, right? These kind of personal essays, or memoir mixed with other stuff, and then we bring in other people, I think there is a concern that we're going to be too harsh on the others and not honest enough about who we are on the page. And I'm just curious how you thought about that.
I think about that all the time. I think about what Philip Lopate says in the introduction to the Art of the Personal Essay, where he talks so much about humility and what it means to write about other people and our responsibility to ourselves. And I think, I write so much about shame, so I don't think it's a secret that I'm filled with shame. So it's actually, I think, harder for me to say anything nice. I'm very self-critical, and I have a real sense of concern about how much space I take up. And I think a lot about space and narrative and like the relationship, like how text looks on a page and the space it takes up, and like what we can do to mess with that, and like how we could use that as a metaphor. And when I'm thinking about like the self-implication parts in that and human animal, it was just true. Like I was just often shitty. But we all are, right? Like, and
so can I stop you for a second? Do you think that I never saw you as shitty in this book?
Well, I think I was also guilty of the same thing. I think they use it, but in a different way. Like they were in my space and staring and looking, but like, what did I do about it? I watched them back.
But don't you think that was in a I'm sorry. Now I'm like mansplaining your own feelings to yourself. But because I read it as I'll say this. This is something that I really appreciate about the book is that you don't let yourself off the hook, right? You interrogate your actions and you interrogate what you're doing. But I think from a reader's standpoint, and hopefully like every reader's standpoint, we see this as a protective measure. That if this wasn't sort of instigated, that you wouldn't have done this.
Totally. That's definitely in there. But I wonder about, certainly if they didn't start it. And they're like, what other options did I have? But there is so much to think about, like, well, if I had just done this differently, and we do that about everything, right? Like, if I had just, gone left instead of right, I wouldn't be here. So the self-implication, I think, is the honesty part of like, I'm never not guilty of something. And like what could I have been doing instead if I wasn't constantly like running up into the attic to look out the window? So maybe not so much like shitty behavior, but like certainly not healthy behavior.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's well. I'm not going to diagnose you. I'm not that. Yeah.
Go
I'm
for
not
it.
going to. No. I'm not going to do that. But I understand that, and I think, well, at least maybe from my end, hopefully, well, as I read it, my impulse was to give you grace in those moments, right? To understand, why you were running up in the attic, because at this point too, you have a young son, right, in the book, and so there's this other layer of protection that's there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I'm very interested in always looking at like how much protection, like what kind of protection can we give? Is there anything that exists without harm? Like, so even in the act of protecting, like who gets harmed because somebody else is receiving care? And I mean, I think that part of part of that is about gentleness too. Like if we can just take a minute and say like, all right, well, this is going to feel good for me, but what are the consequences that go beyond me?
Yeah, that's that's really self-aware too, and I think that is something that we, as a pragmatic existentialist, I try to think about that like right, as
Oh,
often as possible. But it's tough, isn't it? I think it's tough. You've read Simone de Beauvoir? You've read her
yeah.
work, yeah. So I mean, I
Hmm.
think we have this idea of how we want to behave out in the world, and that everything we do can have an effect on every person we come across. But man, that's a tough load of responsibility, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the scarier that times get, the more important it is to take that on, though, especially coming from places of privilege and to think, you know, think twice before we jump into anything.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of Simone de Beauvoir, you also, and this is something I really love about this book, is how you very much engage in conversation with other writers. And frankly, some of my favorites, Maggie Nelson and Claudia Rankin and Sarah Manguso and Eve Kosofsky Sedgwick, and de Beauvoir and de Pont. How how do how do you think about your engagement with those writers as you're going through, like as you're working through this book?
A lot of that is just like a process of thinking for me. Like there's so much to puzzle out, and I had no answers. And the only way I know how to answer anything like that is to read something. So it turns, turn to somebody smarter. so, um, so there, I mean, a lot of that was just the like, well, I don't know why this happened, and I don't know why this happens, and I don't know the history behind this, and I don't know what the consequences can be, but I know other people who think about the same stuff. So what can I learn from them? There's also something, I mean, so deeply lonely about writing always, but like maybe especially writing about violence or and revisiting that. And I think there's something communal, like almost holy about like, well, let me take these smart women that I admire so much and have taught me so much, and like think of them as community, and I mean as mother figures in some way of like, all right, I can't do this myself. There's no way I could do this myself. So who can I reach to help? And then, I mean, I think partially because I'm teaching, partially because I love bell hooks so much. I think often about like, all right, well, I spent a lot of time reading these people, and I had the privilege of going to graduate school and being around other smart people, and like, well, how can I take what I know or what I think I know about what these people are saying and then give it to somebody else in a way that maybe helps unpack the way we talk about them in academic spaces. And like I feel like that's a big response. Like if I'm going to pursue this kind of life, it's my responsibility to maybe say like, all right, well, I might not be right about this, but this is how I read Derrida. Um, And maybe this will help push that conversation forward outside of classroom spaces.
Yeah, I mean, I really wish that more people talked about these writers, the writers that you bring up in this book. And I hope that everyone who has a copy of your book digs into the bibliography because it's a brilliant bibliography. I mean, I
Thank
really
you.
hope that everyone just starts like going down the list and like looking at what's there. I mean, just and there's so much, right? You've got like Derrida, you've got Bart, but then you've got you have like the whole $2 radio stable, right? In the back, right? Billy Rape,
That's a dream pleasure.
I know. They're fantastic. I got to meet Eric really early on, Eric Obanoff. When I was at Ohio State, I invited him to our like editors and agents panel because I was still in grad school at the time and I was doing book reviews for like Pleiades and Brooklyn Rail and stuff, and I had done a couple of early $2 radio titles, and so he and I were in contact, and I mean, I absolutely love everything that they put out.
They're so cool. Yeah, I love them. I mean, I did one for I was the assistant managing editor for Brevity for a while,
Oh,
so I
okay.
did a couple of reviews, and I was like, just
Yeah. But
all
yeah, I
bangers,
mean,
no skips.
you've got Gina Nutt in here and Billy Ray Belcourt and yeah. So yeah, again, I hope everyone like really digs into that because these are writers that I think need to be propped up and talked about and discussed. And I think really for my money, for what it's worth, I find the most interesting writers currently contemporary to not be white men, right?
Yeah.
To be women, to be women of color, to be LGBTQ population. I mean, these are the writers that I'm seeking out to read and engage with, right? And that's not to not to pat myself on the back, but it's just this is the stuff that's interesting, right?
Yeah.
The we do the college I teach at, we do a yearly visiting writer series, and for the past few years I was in charge of it, and I said, well, if I'm going to head this up, then we're instituting a no straight white male rule, right? We will not bring in like that writer. Well, we can bring in a man of color, but I'd really prefer we bring in women and women of color. So because again, like that's the interesting stuff, at least for me.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Did you read that? I'm sure you read the article about the guy who wants to start the press for men.
No, I
I'll send it
didn't.
to you.
Oh, please do. Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to go back to a couple of things. So I recently just saw a film called Motherland, and it's this kind of subversive dystopian film where society's reimagined as individuals being freed from the burden of motherhood and marriage. So, and it's not a comedy. So after birth, the children are taken away and they're raised by the state. The mothers never get to see or touch, know anything about their children as they move forward. And this dystopian society is matriarchal. And this is very much a feminist film. But one of the things that this movie really brought up as I was watching it and how it connected with, to me with your book was this idea of motherhood and shame and how society does such a good job. And by that, I mean terrible, right? Such a good job of making women and mothers feel shame, right? What before birth, after birth, it's just like a reinforcement that they can't do anything right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it starts when we're young. I mean, and it's about bodies and thinking and what it means to take up space and who's allowed to talk and when and what does your voice sound like and how can we change that voice to be different. And I mean, there's no way of removing capitalism and like what that does to motherhood and this like I mean, my son is 17 now. Um, but I remember thinking like all of the stuff, like if I didn't have the right stroller, it wasn't just like I didn't have the cool stroller, it was like I didn't have the safe stroller, and who would do that, and like what was I like, that kind of like stuff shame is, I mean, in a lot of ways just as big for us as the how much weight did you gain or not gain, or are you breastfeeding or not breastfeeding, and are you working or staying home, and neither one is going to
Right.
be okay. You're fucked, you're screwing your child over, and no matter what you do. Yeah, I think there's like, it's limitless, and there's no I like, if I'm thinking about gentle spaces, I think we're also sold this idea of like motherhood as gentle, like all of these paintings of the Madonna and Child, and all of these like glowing moms, and the trad wives with their farms and their beautiful blonde children following them around, ignoring all like
in their
all
in their perfectly clean clothes.
right. And yeah, I mean, we're so like, it's supposed to be beautiful, and you're supposed to want it, and it's not okay to not want it, and it's not okay to regret it, and it's not okay to like admit that it's difficult, or and like there's, it just comes at you from all directions, and there, like, even if there was a space to say this is terrible, like that's laden with guilt.
And then you're
And
blamed for it as well.
right.
Right? Well, it's your fault it's terrible. It's
Right.
clearly not the
Right.
system working against you.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And you should be able to make that system work, because look, here it is. Look at all of this. We want you to have more babies, but go back to work, and childcare is unaffordable. And do you have health insurance? You don't? Oh, so sorry.
Yeah, but do it anyway. Just
Right.
just manifest it, Amy. Just
Yeah.
I mean, but
Don't forget to lose weight. Yeah.
yes, right. Yeah. Heaven forbid that your body isn't what it used to be, right? But yeah, I mean, but going back to that idea of like, yeah, this you can't detach capitalism from this, and that is where so much of this comes from, right? And we have I think a special brand of capitalism where if you just work hard enough, you can do it, right?
Like morality part of it. Yeah.
Right. And yeah, and heaven forbid you need to ask for help.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, what a failure.
Exactly. Throughout the book, you mention quite a few. You mentioned quite a few performance artists and a bit about performance art itself. So from Teresa Hawk Kyung-cha to Marina Abramovich, and even though I don't think you mentioned Yoko Ono, I can't help but think about Cut Piece in here, right?
Yeah.
So
Sure.
so in performance art includes this idea of being watched, and then a big part of this book, right, is you being observed. But this is also, I think, well, how do you think then about performance in everyday life? As mother, as writer, as woman.
I mean, I'd like to say that performance art allows that being watched to give control back to the one being watched. Like, I am giving you permission to look at me, but also like you would have done it anyway. So, and I mean, I don't think there's any way to remove the perform. Like, I don't know. Like, am I performing? I mean, the answer is yes. Like right now, I'm performing for you. We're all performing for each other.
Right.
This sort of whatever it means. And I think, I mean, and we should, not everybody, but I think I definitely shift in all the ways that we code switch.
Sure.
Like, and I think that the performance art I'm drawn to it's unapologetic, and that code switching doesn't have to happen. And I think I'm fascinated by it because I could never do it. I don't think I have. There's too much shame, and I love thinking about it. I love reading about it. I love watching, and I love the way people like write about performance art, because then it becomes this archive of something that's supposed to be ephemeral, but like you really can't. I like that conundrum fascinates me. I love the ideas that people come up with. Like right now, I can't stop thinking about. I can't remember the artist's name. but there was this performance art piece where these women got consensual breast milk, and they did this performance art piece where they served it like it was a wine tasting. And this, like, is breastfeeding cannibalism? It was kind of the question. And if it is it like liquid or solid? Like, and I think about it daily, because it's such a taboo, and shouldn't art be able to do that? Like, isn't that our responsibility as artists to like bring those questions to the surface? And how often are women not allowed that space? But I also think, like, I mean, there is such a risk, and I admire that bravery. That, like, like, there's a lot to be said about Abramovich's work, for good or for bad, but like to lay yourself out there and put your body in such harm's way to prove a point is, is a lot. I find it really admirable.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to find that piece
I'll
about the
send it to
breast milk. Yeah, please do. That sounds incredible. No, and it sounds like such a it's gonna hurt my brain. Like you said,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna think about it like forever now.
I've ruined like the next 6 months of your life.
Oh man, but I mean that's
You're welcome.
yeah. Thank you. So I mean, but you bring up this point that so much of performance art is right. It's trying to take back the power of being observed. But again, there is this. You're opening yourself up to more violence and danger at that point too. And I think we really, we really see that in pieces like, like Abramovich's work, and like Cut Piece. I mean, that was always the thing with Cut Piece, that just the thought of that and realizing what could happen, right. to Yoko Ono if somebody, just the wrong person, goes just a little bit too far, and even not, just how traumatic that must have been anyway.
Right. And the idea that bringing that to the forefront on a stage, whatever the stage is, it's like a larger representation of daily things that people go through. But
right. And I think, going back to something you said earlier, like we all shift our personas a little bit, right? I mean, you're going to talk to me differently than you're going to talk to your husband or your son, right? Later on in the day. And the same thing here, right? Or when you're in class, you probably talk a little bit differently, right?
hopefully.
I mean, well, I'll tell you this, like when when I teach, I'm not too much different than I am. I mean, it's a small line, right? But it's not too different. But again, like, it is enough, right? There is still a kind of persona that we put on even then, and so we're all in a way performing, but yet we don't have the chance, I think, to take that power back in our daily performances. Maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're right. Or even are aware, like, I don't think we can spend our time thinking about that power. Like, we'd be exhausted. Right?
Oh yeah. But wait, aren't you
done.
exhausted like every day? I'm exhausted every day.
Yes.
Like too much of this stuff just wears me out.
Yeah.
Too much of the navigating of the world. But no, I mean, seriously, you're right. We are too caught up kind of in the moment, or really sometimes just too caught up trying to survive. Right. I mean, specific moments to then really kind of think, oh, if I can only sort of shift into this version of Brock or this version of Amie, then maybe, right, I can regain a little sense of power in this moment.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the bestiary for a minute.
Okay.
So you have a paragraph towards the end of the book, and you write, "We utter about one metaphor for every 10 to 25 words, or about 6 metaphors a minute. Carol J. Adams argued that animal metaphors are harmful to animals, but I think when we use animals in our language, we're not erasing the animal, but becoming more aware of our place in the world, more aware of how we exist in relation to them." And so your use of the bestiary is different, but still similar to how Lily Huang uses the bestiary, which I love that book too, by the way.
I love that book.
It's just so incredible. Like when I started to read Human Animal, I went and found my copy and like had it kind of, next to each other. And also, do you know the book, Metaphors We Live By?
No.
No, George Lakoff and Mark Johnson. And so, but these ideas, I mean, it's, I guess more of a philosophy theory book. I mean, but like you start to think about how, like you say in this paragraph, how we use metaphors all the time. All the time. Like everything is a metaphor, right? The rooms we're sitting in are container metaphors, literally containers, right? That work in a metaphorical way. So yeah, it's a fantastic book. But I also was thinking of that too so this is, I mean, hopefully you see this as a compliment to your book, that it makes me think about so many other works that I've already engaged with and how it sort of takes me back to that. But anyway, back to my question. Sorry. So it's similar but yet different to Lily Huang's use of the bestiary. So I'm curious how you kind of imagine this use of metaphor, or how did the metaphor give further kind of meaning to the form and central narrative?
I'm not sure. I think I'm just fascinated by language and how we need something sideways to think straightforward. Like, there's no way for me to tell you what my day was like if I don't compare it to something else. And isn't it fascinating that we need something very not like the thing we're talking about in order to get to the thing we're talking about? And it should make that gap bigger and bigger and bigger. And it doesn't. And I'm not good at math, but that feels wrong. So I think thinking through the animals as metaphors was a way for me to, like, at first, when I first started thinking about writing about the neighbors, I mean, when I first started thinking about it, I tried to write it as an essay, and it sucked. And then I was like, well, I'll just make it fiction, and that was even worse. And it took a long time before I got to and I actually was doing a different animal project so I wasn't even thinking about the neighbors. I was just thinking about language and the animal names we use as verbs and wondering, like, how did we get there? That's weird. And I was just collecting those during COVID and talking to my family about them, and just kind of like, I don't know, I think animals have just always been something I thought about, or like every kid at some point I really wanted to be a veterinarian, but like I also just really wanted animals to like me, like, and that, like, this baby deer, let me pet it. So I was thinking, and at some point it was something about the power and realizing the labor and the violence and the motherhood, and I was like, something about the Oxford English Dictionary, the imperialist language that is the only thing I know, felt like this is the thing that's going to get me close enough to that story about the neighbors that I can't find the words for. But I didn't want to further that harm by also, like, I'm fascinated by that, like, is the language of metaphor, like, where is that harmful? And Carol J. Adams is fascinating to me because I agree and disagree with her, like, on a sentence by sentence level as we go through. And so I think that using metaphor, like, because that's just the way we talk, but then to think about, like, well, how am I going to get to the core of what I think happened? And it seemed like that's the furthest flung thing that I could come up with. And I still struggle, like, when people, there's that dreaded question of, like, well, what's your book about? And you're supposed to be able to do it in one sentence, and I can't, because there's just no linear way to think through that, except that I want it to be like, here are my pieces, and I trust people who are going to pick this up to put them together.
No, I really like this idea about how, I mean, I'm pretty sure that at some point during our, let's say, creative writing education, we were told the Emily Dickinson poem, right, about tell the truth but tell it slant, and
Right.
And I mean, as much as like I say that like it was kind of a cliche, but it makes so much sense, right? We can't come straight forward. We can't like describe these things going straight ahead. We have to kind of look askance at these at these
Yeah.
descriptions or at these like moments in life, and yeah, it only makes sense to find the widest, like, far flung things to compare them to. And I'm sure that you talk about this a lot when you teach, right? Like you can't, or the I use the Flannery O'Connor quote a lot, right? You can't show emotion with emotion, right?
Yeah.
You've got to find a different way to say this so people understand exactly what you're trying to say, right? And that is sort of
Yeah.
like the wonder and magic of language.
Yeah, I mean, I've not thought this is not a fully formed thought, but something that you just said made me wonder about the slantness of telling it as a way of also taking care. Like I wondered a lot about writing violence for strangers, and maybe leaning that heavily on metaphor as a way to wrap it up in a little bit of bubble wrap.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's you're protecting them, but also protecting yourself too.
Did I just use a metaphor to talk about why we use
Yes,
metaphors?
I think you did. I think you did. I think you did. Well, there you go. Look, I think everyone listening just got their money's worth. So, building on with that, you're a visual artist as well. So, how does that work? Kind of inform or connect to your writing.
I was a visual artist first.
Mm.
I did studio art classes when I was a kid. I thought that that's what I was going to do, although I knew that I needed something practical. I didn't come from a family of artists, and I was the first person in my family to go to college. So there was a lot of like I wanted to be an artist, but also knew that there like something else had to happen. Um, and I dip in and out of visual art all the time. I don't have a lot of confidence in myself as a visual artist, but I love it. My husband is a visual artist, so like it's in my house, it's something I think about, but I don't like it's more. It's a little bit more in my body than writing is. And I'm fascinated, and I know you are too, and I feel like we could do a whole second podcast on the relationship between image and text
You want to book
and how
that for
one
later?
informs the other. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Let's coach the class. But like that feels collaborative to me. Like even even when they are juxtaposed or like intentionally, like I don't know, like I was just talking to a friend last night about mouse and like all the ways that you read image, and when it contradicts it, that's also a metaphor, right? It's bringing it in closer. um but I also think that there's a way of seeing when you engage in line and shadow that way that I need to see better. Like I can't, if writing is the way that I figure things out as close as I can ever figure anything out because it's a thinking process, then drawing is a seeing process for me. And there are some drawings in that book that I despise. Like I worked and reworked over and over and over again and turned it anyway because it was time. And I think I kind of love them the best because I learned so much about how to see. Um, and I wrote this book on a proposal, like, and I'd never done that before. It was really an interesting process, but so I turned in a proposal with a couple of sketches, but I hadn't drawn anything in years. So then by the time I was done with the narrative and had to go back in, I didn't use any of those original ones, I don't think, because I had somehow like learned so much trying to draw again. Um, and since I had just spent 3 years writing about such violence, to sit and draw animals felt really good. Like it was just like, okay, here's something I can like do while the TV is on, that feels good and looks beautiful, and even in its imperfection, to be like, well, here's the gentle. It's this duck.
But I mean, it sounds too like the gentleness comes through the process as well, or comes from the process as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you were, so how did you be, how did you decide to become an artist slash writer if you weren't necessarily exposed to it growing up? Were you surrounded by books or no? Or,
Um, I mean, this is not the right answer, but I feel like I was around a lot of books. My mom liked to read, but I'm the oldest of four, so she didn't do a whole lot of it. My grandmother loved to read, but I read a lot of like the wrong books. Like I read Danielle Steele's Daddy when I was
sure.
like 8. Um, and
Look, that book was on our shelves at home too, although I never read it. So,
don't. um, but I never read like To Kill a Mockingbird. Like I didn't have that like canonical education. So I still now like feel 3 steps behind always. Um, so there were lots of books, but they were not the books that like when I went to grad school, like I hadn't read Moby Dick. Um, I did really well in school, but like I was really a lazy student and lucky. So like, did I read Of Mice and Men? Kind of. Um, but I could write well, and I mean that's maybe how I got away with not. And it wasn't that I wasn't reading because I didn't enjoy it. It just was, I don't know, not not the thing that I thought was going to get me somewhere other than the small town I was living in. Um, and I went to school. I was pre-med actually because I thought that that would
oh wow.
be the. And I failed botany my first semester. It all went off the rails from there. And studied psychology, but I didn't go to school for English until I was in my 30s.
Okay. I'm I'm the oldest of five. So
See, I knew we had
see,
this.
right? I know. Yeah, that was when you said that. I was like, oh, of course. Okay, that makes perfect sense. Right?
Yeah.
I think this is interesting because I mean, I grew up around a ton of books as well, but I how to say this without being sort of like offensive to my parents, but I like quickly moved past the books that were on our shelves at home, and then had to seek out some of the different things. And if you're feeling like I don't know, not confident about like your reading, I mean, again, have you looked at the bibliography in the back of this book? Because I think that's
I do.
I,
I mean, we're not like I don't know. I think the people I love most and talk to, like everybody feels that way,
oh,
right? Like
I
there's
was
just too much,
yes,
there's so
yes,
much.
yeah, yeah. I was gonna say like, how do we? I mean, I feel like all of us kind of in this world or who wants to be in this world feel like imposters on some level.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, whether it's through the writing or the like you said with the visual art. I mean, you immediately were just like, well, I'm not very good, and I haven't done it in a while, and like in my head, I'm like, oh, shut up, right? I mean that in a kind way,
Yeah. I
but
mean, what is good anyway? Who's to say what good is?
well, no, I mean exactly, right? But I mean, yeah, I think most of us do that exact same thing, right? We write something and it's like, oh, that's terrible, right? And like no matter how many times we rewrite it or someone tells us it's good, it's like no, it's not. Like
Right.
it just or even if somebody like likes it and publishes it, then the thought is, well, I've got to do it again. I don't know how. I don't know if I can do it again. Right?
Right.
That's always the, oh, what if I forget how? So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting, I don't know, kind of like conundrum on how we continue to do these things, even when we seem to lack like confidence.
Yeah. Yeah. What's wrong with us?
No, I know, I know. I've often said like I wish my crazy was the kind of crazy that like led to productivity, right? Like, and
Yes.
just irrational confidence to be able to do what like just everything and just feel like I do it well. But yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let me ask you this last question. So Amie, to wrap up, any recommendations on books or music or films or art exhibitions or yeah, anything at all?
Yes. So many things.
Oh, good, good.
Let's see. I don't even know where to start. So I've recently been fascinated with, and I have an essay coming out on Monday that kind of spits through this fascination, but I have with the three witches of surrealism, Kati Horna and Leonora Carrington and Remedios Veros, who were artists in Europe, and during the war they fled, and they all kind of reconvened in Mexico, and they lived collaboratively and like raised their kids together and made art together, and it was all like really weird um, and I so anything that is related to them, I can't stop thinking about.
Where's the essay going to be published in?
Lit Hub.
Okay.
So that, and I think it's Monday, which is like just such a, I love them. I'm watching so much good TV right now. I don't even know where to start. Like we're watching, I can't remember the name of it. Michelle Williams is in it. It's called like Good Sex or something, where she's dying.
Oh, it's
and on a
Dying
mission
for
to have
Sex.
Dying for sex.
Yeah,
So
Dying for
good.
Sex. Yeah, I've heard really great things about that. Yeah.
It's yeah, it's like it's funny and sad, and we're only like an episode and a half
And
in, but
she's just absolutely wonderful. Michelle Williams is just fantastic.
it's so cool. We watched a show called Flowers that I keep telling people about. Because it was so weird. Olivia Colman's in it, and
Yep,
I
yep,
would die
yep.
for her.
Yes.
Have you watched it?
Yes.
Like, oh,
It's so
so good.
bizarre.
Like
Yeah.
it was so bizarre. And I love just the weirdness of that. I
Yeah,
also
it's
like short
absurd
lived
in all the
watching.
best ways.
Yeah, and like heartbreaking, and just like, and I think that's my favorite thing, like the absurdly heartbreaking thing that like makes my guts hurt. Um, I watched that, and then I watched the movie The Lobster. Did you see that?
Yes.
Another,
I'm a big Yorgos Lanthimos fan. The director.
yeah, I mean, that's a weird brain, man. Yeah, love it. Um, and then I'm reading like six different things right now. Carol Masso's novel, The Art Life,
Okay.
from my book club, very, very good. Um, I think that's the one that's taking up most of my time right now that I would recommend. I just finished reading One Day Everyone Will Always Have Been Against This
Oh
by
yeah.
Omar Syed, after listening to his Between the Covers podcast. So that was something that I read recently that kind of destroyed me a little bit, in the ways that it should. Um, and I think that that's still like spinning in my head on. I mean, speaking of like, what is our culpability and the violence in the world?
Right. And yeah, what can we do about certain things? And I mean, how like God, how powerless do we feel at times?
Right, right, and we can't. It's not like we can't feel powerless. There's only pushback. There's
Yeah.
only time for whatever it is that we can do.
I get angry when people tell us to, I don't know, get involved or do something, and you just want to like throw your hands up and you're like, what am I supposed to do? Right? I've seen communities burn themselves down through anger and nothing changes. I'm just, and of course I don't want to do nothing, but then I'm just like, what? I just
Right,
don't know what to, and that's so frustrating. It is so
right,
frustrating. And then there are other times where I am really worried about coming off as like a white savior as well. And
yeah,
or of trying to act like, well, now I'm adding legitimacy to this to this movement, right?
right,
Let me.
right,
And so it's like, and I don't mean that to be like, oh, like woe is me. It's so hard to like, but it is a like that moral responsibility of how do we behave correctly or
I
gently.
yeah, and I mean, to bring us back to the performance art piece,
Yeah.
there's such a like, well, I did this thing, and I need to tell somebody, or nobody's going to believe me that I did it. So like, I'm going to let you. And I mean, some of the things that we do are just small. Like, I don't know, I didn't lose my shit driving to work and let somebody. Um, which that's a lie. I definitely. I wish I could rein that in. But like I feel like there's all of this outward pressure to say, well, I'm boycotting Target and I am giving money here and I'm following this place, when really like that takes so much time to say those things out loud. And But we've kind of lost the thread on what it means to be altruistic in that kind of way.
I have this conversation a lot with, I feel like I have it at every class I teach where I ask the question, can we really be altruistic? Or does altruism actually exist, right? And it ends up usually being like a whole hour, like, argument. But this is the thing, like, if are we truly being altruistic if I have to go on TikTok and explain to everyone what I did today, right? All the good that I did today. I mean, it feels a little self-serving, and is that altruistic at that point?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I tried for a little while to do. I was thinking about the game Two Truths and a Lie, which is I don't know where the thought came from, but I was like, you know what I want to try to do? I want to try to strike some kind of balance. And for a little while on Blue Sky, I still can't get used to saying that, Blue Sky.
Yeah, I know.
I was posting two pieces of news that I thought weren't getting enough attention, and then one piece of art or one good thing. And then I got all in my head about that, like the good thing felt petty, or like I was trying to cancel out the bad, and then the bad was so heavy. And that's all, and then I don't know, there's just so much out there that there's no way to consume it all. There's no answers to any of these huge questions. We have to do the very best we can. I think it's so important to have art right now and community and like, I don't know, talk to you about all of these things that are really important are gonna.
I was gonna say, like, conversations like these, I mean, kind of give me life. I mean, it's like, yes, there are things to talk about with really smart, wonderful people, right? And I'm lucky to have, here in Texas, a couple of world-class museums that I can just dip in and out of and kind of get lost in. Which is surprising, right? I mean, like, when I first moved down here, I was like, whoa, these museums are incredible. And I'm like, how does that work? Kind of look around and like, although we just had, I don't know if you saw this in the news, but there was a child pornography suit or threat brought against the photographer Sally Mann, whose works were hanging in the Modern Art Museum here in Fort Worth.
Whoa.
Yeah. And we were all just, I mean, all of us were just kind of like, this is ridiculous. This conversation's already been had, right? Like what, like why, right? Some conservative group got really upset, right? That these works that have been shown, been around forever. And then
the cyclicality of that, like that very, and like, let's go after the same artist with the same art and have the same conversation. Because it's easy, right?
Right. I mean, that is the laziness of kind of, well, it's that banality of evil, isn't it? I mean, it's that kind of like Hannah Arendt, idea of, it seems tame, or we don't notice it when it's happening, but there it is.
Yeah.
Well, that's a chipper place to leave the conversation. The book is Human Animal, a Bestiary and Essays. Amie Souza Reilly, thank you so much for the conversation. It was wonderful.
Delightful.
It was wonderful.
Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed today's show, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back soon, but until then, thank you for listening and take care of yourselves.